Now, this book came out in 1941. This, in 1941, was one of the most popular books of its time. Everybody read it. If you hadn't read it, you knew what this book was about. Everybody considered Burnham to be the futurist of his era. Now, Burnham, nobody's ever heard of him. This book is about the rise of global government and an unlimited state. Burnham was actually a former Communist Party leader in America. And then he found out what communism was really about, and he became a conservative. But before he discovered American conservatism, he was a trusted friend of Mr. Trotsky. Yeah, Lenin, Trotsky, one of his most trusted supporters. Later in life, he saw the evils of communism and said, hey, I gotta get away from you because that's evil. He realized what it really was. Marxism was a giant farce, and he ran in the other direction. Quote, a former follower of Leon Trotsky, this is from his obituary, Mr. Burnham broke with his left-wing associates in the late 1930s and became an outspoken conservative whose blunt warnings about the perils of communism left a lasting imprint on the American political debate. But you've never heard of him, have you? Well, maybe you have. He was the founding editor of National Review. But this is the book that made him famous, The Managerial Revolution. And in it, he describes a revolution that is boiling, leaving power, leaving the hands of capitalists, and putting that power into the hands of a new ruling class of technocrats. Managers, he calls them. The progressives talked about this in the early 1900s under Woodrow Wilson. In Philip Drew, administrator, technocrats. Managers would gain massive power that would extend throughout all aspects of society, production, politics, culture, everything. Because he said there were three giants of the day. There was fascism, socialism, and communism. And all of them would come together to supplant human freedom in exchange for a big totalitarian state. He said, if you don't think it's coming, no, you should pay a little closer attention because it's already here. He said it should be noted the theory of managerial revolution is not merely predicting what may happen in a hypothetical future. The theory is, to begin with, an interpretation of what has already happened and what is now happening. It's a prediction, is simply the process which has started and which has already gone a great distance, and it will continue and reach completion. He used in his book, 1941, three examples. Nazism in Germany, that's fascism, communism in the Soviet Union, and for socialism, he said the New Deal in the United States. He said they might look different on the surface, but they're the same thing. Now remember, he's a communist supporter. They move in exactly the same direction, and they have one similar goal in mind, and that is a global state. You see, we minded our own business before progressivism, and then we decided we should export this freedom deal around the rest of the world. It was a progressive idea. Fascism was, let's export fascism around the whole world, and same with communism. Now, if you study James Burnham in school, first of all, it'd have to be in grad school because that's the only time they finally run out of Marxists to teach. But they'll also tell you that James Burnham was discredited because he made a fatal mistake, and it wasn't just becoming a conservative. He committed the very serious academic faux pas of trying to see over the horizon and put all of the pieces together to warn people about what was coming. Now, if you're an academic, well, that's something you just don't do. I mean, unless you're on the wrong side of things. No serious scholar, unless they're on our side, predicts the future. Our job is to pontificate on the past. Right. James Burnham, nonetheless, didn't care if it was scholarly or not. He needed to warn the world. The world was in trouble. Possible that he's forgotten just because he got a little too close to the truth and he became a conservative. But he said soon, with the help of social revolutions around the world, three giant superstates would emerge. This is where he got it wrong. He said there would be one in the Western Hemisphere, socialism, and it would be dominated by the United States. Another superpower would be in Europe, fascism, and that would be in Germany. And then another one in Asia, and that one would be ruled by Japan. Remember, the Empire of Japan and Nazi Germany. The only one of those after the war ended that was still standing was the United States. The war ended, Germany had been destroyed. The Empire of Japan had been destroyed, and we became an ally with Japan. The power was with Russia, and technocrats were running that, but technocrats were not running us, or were they? Scholars ran around saying he was wrong, look at that, he's wrong. Academics rushed out to destroy his reputation, and while doing so, they missed a vital point that he made. He believed, if in fact this is a larger social revolution, that you have to look at World War II as subordinate to or second fiddle to a much larger revolution, not the other way around. You have to look at World War II as one episode in the revolution. And I'm telling you, if you look at World War I as the first phase, World War II as the second phase in a larger revolution for global power, you will realize there's a third one coming. So while professors were out stomping out his book, the two superpowers emerged. And these powers fought a silent battle for power for over a century, or for the last century. And there they are, the Soviet Union and the United States, the Cold War. During this time, Germany and everybody else cooled off. They rested and sharpened their tools. But all of the unsettled grievances and loose ends started to fester underneath the surface. And then 10 years ago, finally, one player was ready to come back to the surface. One who had dominated the world for a long, long time, and a long time ago, was beginning to demand her seat back at the table among the communists, the socialists, and the fascists. And it was the Arab world. All of a sudden, the Arab world began to rise again. This is bringing in the next phase, possibly the last phase of revolution that James Burnham didn't get. He didn't get it right. But are we entering now a third phase? Discrediting Burnham completely is like saying, oh, the scientists warned about the eruption of Mount St. Helens. I mean, they were totally wrong. I mean, they said it would cover 11 cities with ash. It only covered 8. It's going to happen. And what is it going to be like? It could be very much something like he talked about in the past. In fact, they seem to be the same players. I'm not going to predict exactly what is going to happen tonight, but I thought we should show you some possibilities, because there's an awful lot of people pulling for this actually to happen, and they fit in those 3 categories. What I'm going to show you tonight is just kind of my current thoughts, and the reason why I'm expressing it is because that's kind of the relationship you and I have. I say it out loud, and then we kind of chew on it for a while. It may not be exactly right, but you'll be able to think out of the box and see what I'm thinking. I want you to really think about, where are we? Where are we as mankind? I don't think it's a pretty place that we're standing at the doorway of. And if we keep playing just intellectual games while believing that we don't have any political power or say-so as a people or as a person, and thus we hold no responsibility, the picture is only going to get much, much worse. The theories in the books, these books, only happen because there is extremism in the world, an atmosphere of extremism, an atmosphere of extreme universal shortages of cash, jobs, food, stability, lack of security, massive distrust of the institutions all around the world. But don't worry, the only other thing required is war. Hey, didn't we just send the B-2 bomber to South Korea today? So what does the world look like in the future if these guys were right? I'm going to take you to the map and show you a possible future next.